My name is Josh McIntosh. I design productions for a living, so I design sets and costumes and props for all forms of live theatre and for festivals as well. So it might be ballet, opera, vaudeville, burlesque, arena, plays, musicals, the whole bit. It's a silly job. And I didn't seek the job, so I didn't go hunting after it. I actually taught in high schools for 12 years. I taught here for a year in '94, taught film and television. I ended up kind of just getting mugged by my job and dragged into a dark alley, and I started doing some set design for Harvest Rain Theatre Company almost 20 years ago while I was still teaching. And I was just doing that for larks. I did it, for petrol money, and I'd do 2 or 3 shows a year while I was teaching full time. And then little bit by little bit, design work started taking over and more work got thrown at me in that regard. So I quit teaching and went full-time freelance designer about 16 years ago. So I suppose I was drawn towards this as a job because I kind of had the skill set that was required to do it. But it was funny because I didn't deliberately set out to acquire that skill set. It was just kind of things that I'd collected over the years from growing up in the school, from doing lots of stuff at my church, from being a high school teacher, from using tools at home with Dad and things like that. All of a sudden I was in this job where I had to draw things and I had to realise things and I had to organise people and I had to sort of get things done on time and I had to make it all look good and stand up for 6 weeks and then be able to push it over. And I seem to have had collected the skill set to be able to do that job, and there are not a lot of other people doing that job, particularly in Brisbane. So it's kind of, it was like, oh great, well I could do this for a bit, and that's almost 20 years ago now. I don't have any tertiary study. I don't have any tertiary qualifications at all for my job. I did a Bachelor of Education and that was great, and I taught, as I said, and I loved that. You can go to tertiary institutions and get a design degree, and that would certainly enable you to develop a bit of a skill set, but it really is the kind of job where you don't know how to do it until you do it. And even after having done it for as long as I'm doing it, every show I do, there's something new that I've got to figure out or solve or learn, whether it's a new skill set or a new material or a new technique of building something or creating something or all that kind of thing. So yes, you can get a tertiary degree, but you don't learn anything until you're doing it. Well, the job of a stage designer, a set designer, a production designer is really to help realise the visual collateral, I suppose, of a show. But built into that is also, you have to solve technical issues as well. So you kind of have to think in two trains at the same time. So the technical train and the aesthetic train. So my work will be everything from reading a script to having meetings with other creative teams, so the director and the lighting designer and choreographer and people like that. And slowly starting to build up what might be the design aesthetic of a show, what certain aspects might look like, how to solve that problem, how to enable the whole show to happen. I actually do build a lot of my own sets and art a lot of my own sets. Most designers don't do that, but it's something that I really, really enjoy. So sometimes I'm wearing a shirt and tie, sometimes I'm just wearing a pair of painty shorts and work boots and getting covered in sawdust or iron filings or paint or whatever. But then there's also things like I have to go out shopping for shoes for an actor or turn up at a rehearsal with certain amounts of things and make sure that they work. So it's a really varied day. I don't really have a typical day, which I enjoy. It's good. You need to be able to draw, or at least you need to be able to visually articulate an idea. So if you can't draw, there are other ways to do that. You can collage or you can Photoshop or things like that. But one of the most critical phases of my job is where you're developing what a set might look like or what a costume might look like, and then to be able to show that to the director or the actor or the costume maker or somebody who's building your set for you, and for there to be clear communication about what that bit of collateral is. And you do meet some designers who aren't terribly great drawers, and so they have to find other ways to communicate that, or to be able to build a model, or to write about it really well or something. So, that's one of the skill sets that you really need, is to be able to visually articulate an idea. The other skill set is really, I think, to have a good sense of three-dimensional space and what is going to look good within a theatre or a performance venue, how an audience is going to respond to that, and what the dynamic is going to be. The other thing you need to be able to do is know how to tell a story, and how, because essentially theatre, all forms of theatre, is storytelling, whether it's dance or opera or a musical or whatever. And so as part of the key creative team, you have to be somebody who understands how your work helps tell the story or a story, and make sure that it's combining with the way everyone else is working. Look, actually, I enjoy pretty much every aspect of the job. It is rewarding to finally get a set on stage and go, yeah, look, it looks like the drawing. It's actually working, it's good. But one of the most satisfying experiences I've had within my job is to do work where you're working with complete amateur community performers. And I've been able to do that sort of every 2 years with Queensland Music Festival, where we'll go to a large regional centre, it might be Gladstone or Charleville or Bowen, something like that. And we enrol as many people as we can convince to get on stage to create a show. And we basically build the show backwards. So we find out who's in that town and what they can do. They can play bagpipes, or they're cheerleaders, or they can sing really well, or they play the euphonium, or they're a horse whisperer, or they can make a bobcat dance or something like that. And then we find a way to enrol all those talent into a show, and then we mount that show. It's a huge endeavour, and it costs a lot, and it's a free event then for that community. But what is so rewarding is the performers in those shows get such a buzz, and they are so excited, and it's such a unique, strange, wonderful thing to do. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing often for the kind of people who live in those communities. And I am reminded in those occasions of just how special my work is, and how unusual it is, and how privileged I should remember to feel. So yeah, that's really fun. It's great. Look, it is a job where a deadline and a timeline actually means something. It's not like a carpenter can say, it rained today so we couldn't build the roof. We have an opening night, we have deadlines throughout rehearsals, and they have to be met, otherwise the flow-on effect can be disastrous. And if you're not ready for an opening night and you've got people paying $100 a ticket, then you have some very, very disappointed patrons on your hand. So the timelines, I actually work well under a deadline, and I work well under that kind of, that strain, that stress. It's kind of fun, but it is also at the same time, it kind of wakes me up early in the morning going, I've got to get that done and that done and that done. So that's a bit terrifying, but a bit fun. Yeah. Yeah, look, I mean, obviously the C word is, the most recent big challenge for the arts industry and the entertainment industry. It has leveled it, and I am friends and colleagues with so many people who have not worked in a year and probably won't work for the next 6 months. We're really fortunate here in Queensland and in Brisbane. We're able to do, at the moment, 100% audiences, which is fantastic. There's been a lot of funding chucked around, and so people who've been holding their breath to produce a show all year are kind of going, right, let's do it now. So it's exciting. But I'm, for example, designing a show in Sydney at the moment, and they're still at 75% capacity, so they've had to whittle back their budgets and whittle back their promo, but they still want to get lots of people in. And so we'll see how the industry does kind of move on. And, there's lots of alternatives and lots of coping mechanisms. But at its best, theatre is, it's hard pressed to make money in theatre. You don't actually turn a profit usually until you're selling about 75 or 80% of a theatre. So you can't afford to run a show that's 50% or 75% of capacity. So yeah, it's strange days, but exciting and fun. And I'm really, really blessed to have loads of work on at the moment because I live here in Brisbane and I'm not in London or New York. I'm always encouraged to see how the arts industry and how arts practitioners change the world and impact the world. Even, you know, a year ago when we were getting spat out of bushfire season, and artists all over, performing artists were working for free to raise tens of millions of dollars for people who needed that kind of relief. And that kind of thing happens all the time. And arts practitioners also have a platform to be able to speak into the community and to speak, you know, good messages. So hopefully they do. But even when we were lucky enough to run a Christmas Carol. So Shake and Stir produced a beautiful version of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Last year was the 3rd year in a row that we've done it, and it was just miraculous that we were able to put it on in the Lyric, sell it out, do 2 weeks of chockers performances. And there is a charity called the Actors Benevolent Fund, which was started about 30 years ago. And they exist to just kind of collect a little bit of money, and if there's an actor who is out of work and has hospital bills or something like that, they will often give them a bit of a fund. The Actors Benevolent Fund, of course, last year was not able to collect for the entire year. So Shake and Stir invited them to collect at every performance of A Christmas Carol with the hope of maybe raising about 30 grand or something like that. They thought that'd be a pretty good budget. They ended up collecting nearly $80,000 from patrons who were coming to the show, who were, you know, just delighted to be back in a theatre, but also, you know, motivated and inspired by the story of Scrooge in A Christmas Carol to be generous. And so that, you know, that event and that outpouring was just spectacular. It was amazing. So, you know, there's all sorts of ways that people in my industry are able to impact the world. It's great. Look, I would recommend be an engineer. No, look, I really, really enjoy my job. The arts industry is always like, it's unpredictable. My income is unpredictable. I'm blessed enough to have a good income. It's great. And my wife doesn't have to work. That's fantastic. That's unusual, you know, and most people in an arts industry, you know, they settle for the love of their art. But that's not to say that you can't go for broke and be a Sigrid Thornton or a Nicole Kidman or a, you know, Eric Bana or those kind of people. And I suppose when it all comes down to it, if you're not doing something that you enjoy, then that impacts everything else in your life. And I'm really, really blessed enough to do a job that I really, really enjoy. And I recognise that I'm, you know, a tiny percentile of the world's population who actually enjoys pretty much every aspect of their work. So it's good.